United States, Bermuda Triangle, August 26, 1974. Many believe that we are alone in the universe. However, one day something inexplicable happened. Something that forced us to ask ourselves, is this really true? It was a warm summer evening in August 1974, when Captain John Jack Reynolds, an experienced United States Air Force pilot, set off on a routine patrol flight over the Atlantic. As a military pilot with many years of experience, Reynolds had flown countless missions over various waters, from the Persian Gulf to the eastern coast of the USA. This time, he was tasked with testing a new reconnaissance aircraft, and his route passed through one of the most mysterious places in the world, the Bermuda Triangle. The Bermuda Triangle, also known as the Devil's Triangle, had long been the subject of numerous legends and speculations. Although Reynolds never believed in tales of disappearing ships and planes, the place had an unsettling aura. Most phenomena were attributed to technical problems, pilot errors, or difficult weather conditions. However, something was about to happen that would forever change his perception of reality. The mission started routinely. The plane took off from an airbase in Florida just after 6 p.m. The goal was to conduct a series of tests on a new radar system designed to detect even the smallest anomalies on the water and in the air. The flight path included flying over the area between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, in the very heart of the Bermuda Triangle. As Reynolds ascended to higher altitudes, an unexpected silence fell over the Atlantic. The plane entered autopilot mode, and only darkness stretched out, interrupted by the faint glow of the moon reflecting off the waters below. Above the clouds, there were no signs of turbulence or weather threats, making the flight seem calm. Everything in the cockpit appeared to be functioning correctly, but the pilot couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There was an elusive tension in the air. Even radio communications, usually filled with chatter and messages, seemed strangely quiet. He glanced at the displays. Everything was fine, except for minor disturbances in the radio system. Reynolds initially assumed it was a small malfunction in the communication system. Still, he began to worry that both the communications and the atmosphere around the plane seemed oddly flat, as if something was muffling radio waves and sounds. At the moment, the captain recalled stories he had heard from other pilots about the Bermuda Triangle. He had always ignored them, dismissing them as exaggerated tales shared over beers after duty. Disappearing ships, sudden storms, magnetic anomalies. All these stories now seemed much more real, though Reynolds still rejected the idea that something could actually be going on. As the plane approached its planned cruising altitude, the darkness outside the cockpit windows seemed to thicken. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, the captain spotted something strange, a faint flash on the horizon. He thought it was just a reflection of the moon off the waves, but then the flash repeated, this time much closer. A bright white streak of light appeared momentarily, then vanished. Reynolds furrowed his brow, staring into the space ahead of him. The light looked different from any atmospheric phenomenon he knew. It was neither distant lightning nor reflections from objects on the water. It was something else. For a brief moment, he felt a sense of déjà vu. He had heard about such sightings from other pilots, but never imagined he would experience them himself. However, before he could ponder this further, another, larger light flashed on the radar screen. This time, there was no doubt. The radar began to register objects appearing and disappearing from the screen in random locations. They looked like small dots moving at an unprecedented speed. These were objects whose speed surpassed any known technological capabilities. Reynolds, despite his experience, had never seen anything like it before. He immediately contacted the control tower in Miami, but received a response that their systems were not detecting any unusual movements in the area. Suddenly, right in front of him, an extremely bright light appeared on the horizon. The object was approaching his plane at breakneck speed. The pilot tried to set a course to avoid the unidentified object, but it seemed to respond to every maneuver, adjusting its trajectory. At one point, the light stopped abruptly, as if hovering in the air, and then, just as quickly, began to rise vertically, disappearing from view. Reynolds struggled to control the aircraft, as suddenly the Tansi-Aus onboard us systems Boisazu completely failed. But the compass, radar, and even the altimeter stopped working, and the plane gradually began to lose altitude. Fortunately, as Reynolds neared sea level, the instrument started functioning again, as if nothing had happened. The entire situation felt surreal. Just when the pilot thought the worst was behind him, he noticed something resembling a massive metallic object hovering above the ocean's surface. It was at a disc-shaped structure, about 100 meters in diameter, with pulsating lights around its edge. The object emitted no sound, and its surface reflected the moonlight in a way that seemed unnatural. Reynolds, unable to believe his eyes, began recording the entire event with the onboard camera. Suddenly, the metallic disc, which had previously seemed to hover in the air completely still, began to move toward the plane, first slowly, almost majestically, and then with increasing speed. Reynolds, observing the phenomenon, felt a growing tension. It was as if the space around him thickened and the air in the cabin became heavier. The object moved in an unnatural way, defying any known laws of physics. There were no signs of propulsion, sound, or turbulence, yet its presence was overwhelming. The vibrations in the cabin began to intensify, as if the plane had suddenly found itself in a field of strong magnetic or gravitational force. Metal components of the fuselage started to creak, and every small part of the aircraft seemed to resonate under the influence of this invisible force. Reynolds felt the vibrations penetrate his body, resonating with every nerve, sending chills down his spine. The onboard instruments went haywire. Tachometers, compass, and speed indicators began to oscillate wildly, and warning systems emitted a series of alarm sounds, further deepening the chaos in the cockpit. The entire structure of the plane seemed to sway under the pressure of this unknown force, as if it had become a defenseless leaf tossed by a mighty storm. Reynolds, despite his years of experience and iron nerves, began to feel uncertainty, as if his control over the machine was slipping away. He was prepared for various malfunctions and extreme weather conditions, but nothing from his previous training could prepare him for something like this. The disc was approaching faster, seemingly about to collide with his plane. And then, in a split second, as Reynolds nearly reached for the emergency maneuver lever, the object suddenly shot upward with astonishing speed. Its acceleration was so rapid that it left no trace or sound behind, as if the space itself had warped around it, allowing it to vanish without a trace. One moment it was in front of the plane, and the next, it was gone. No aircraft that Reynolds had ever seen could achieve such speed, let alone vanish suddenly and silently. A silence fell, absolute, overwhelming silence, as if the entire world held its breath for a moment. Reynolds stared into the empty sky before him, trying to comprehend what had just happened. All that remained of that moment was the memory of an indescribable sensation and an unsettling feeling that he had experienced something that transcended human understanding. Upon returning to land, Captain Reynolds immediately realized that what he had witnessed could not go unreported. As a loyal soldier, he believed in the system and knew that any unusual situation that could threaten national security had to be reported to command without delay. Despite his growing doubts and fears, Reynolds felt it was his duty to report the entire incident. Upon arriving at the base, he went straight to his superiors, ready to describe every detail from the mysterious instrument malfunctions to the sighting of the metallic disc and its sudden disappearance. He knew his account would raise concerns, but he did not anticipate how quickly events would take an unexpected turn. Minutes after submitting his report, a group of mysterious agents arrived at the base, who turned out to be part of a secret research unit of the US government. They were not typical officers. His mixed feelings were stirred by their behavior, cold stares, and lack of identification. They began confiscating all materials related to the mission: camera footage, data from onboard systems, and even his personal notes. The atmosphere became tense, and Reynolds felt increasingly disoriented. It was as if he had suddenly found himself at the center of a larger, unseen operation, whose significance he did not understand. When attempts were made to push him aside, he tried to ask a question. Who are these people? Why are they taking all the evidence? His superior, clearly tense, replied tersely, "It's not your concern, Captain. Please do not ask questions." That was the last thing he heard that day regarding his encounter with the unidentified object. A few days later, Reynolds received a summons to meet with a high-ranking military intelligence officer. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension. The officer, with an expressionless face, explained to Reynolds that his report had been classified as top secret. He received a direct order, not to speak about what he had seen to anyone, neither colleagues nor family. Otherwise, he would face a court-martial and imprisonment for revealing state secrets. "Some things are better left unexplained," the intelligence officer added, as if to emphasize that what Reynolds had witnessed was beyond the understanding of both him and all of humanity. At the end of the conversation, he was suggested that the Bermuda Triangle was not an ordinary place, that events in that area of the Atlantic had been observed and studied for decades, but never fully explained. The officer looked Reynolds straight in the eye and said, "Not everything that happens in this world can be understood. We are not alone on this planet, nor in the universe." Those words lingered in Reynolds' mind for years. Over the following years, he tried to adhere to orders. He knew he was a loyal soldier, and silence was part of his duty. However, what he had witnessed tormented him every night. He attempted to understand what had truly happened. He sifted through books, searched for materials on UFOs, and read reports and studies about the Bermuda Triangle. He also met with other pilots who, as suggested, might have had similar experiences. Yet each meeting ended in silence. No one wanted to speak. Everyone feared the consequences. For years, an atmosphere of secrecy surrounded Reynolds. People in his circle knew he had encountered something extraordinary, but none of his colleagues had the courage to ask questions. Every attempt at conversation resulted in the subject being abruptly cut off, or the other person withdrawing. It wasn't until 1990, after retiring, that Reynolds decided to break his silence. He felt he had nothing left to lose, and the mystery he had carried for so long was beginning to overwhelm him. He chose to share his story with a journalist investigating UFO cases. In a private, closed interview, Reynolds recounted everything he remembered from that day, from the strange instrument malfunctions to the astonishing encounter with the unidentified object. In the conversation, he expressed his deep belief that objects like the one he had seen could not be of human origin. The technology demonstrated by that disk, its maneuvers, acceleration, sudden disappearance, exceeded the capabilities of contemporary science. Reynolds acknowledged that he was convinced the Bermuda Triangle was a place that harbored far more secrets than we could ever comprehend. "Something is happening here that we cannot understand," he said. "What I saw was beyond human capabilities." His account was one of many voices of witnesses who experienced something extraordinary in the Bermuda Triangle, but it was also one of the few that reached the public eye. Although his words could not change the official narrative of governments regarding UFOs, they became proof for many enthusiasts that something indeed occurs in the waters of the Atlantic, and the truth about this place might be far more complex than previously thought. Reynolds sought answers until the end of his life, but he never found them. The mystery of the UFO he witnessed in 1974 and the phenomena occurring in the Bermuda Triangle remained the greatest enigma of his life. However, his story, though suppressed for many years, shed new light on what might truly lie in the depths of the ocean and the skies above the Atlantic. Don't be afraid to speak the truth. If you have your own story, experiences, or evidence related to UFOs, please email us. Your story is important and can help others who have had similar experiences. UFO X-Files connects us. You are not alone.